What's up, guys? This is Sean with Gadget Reason, and this is the first episode of Tech and Coffee. And Tech and Coffee is a new series that I decided to start doing, and it's basically going to be just me curating some of the top trending tech stories or interesting news stories in tech that I found over the past few days, as well as discussing some of the current technology experiences that I'm having, any new products that I'm using, anything that's going on in my tech world, and some of the experiences that I've had that you might find interesting. And I'll try to keep the stories as interesting and fresh as I possibly can. Now, the first thing I want to talk about today is the DJI Spark. Now, obviously there have been a ton of reviews and a ton of stories done about the DJI Spark since it first got announced. So if you're at all someone who follows tech, you've probably heard a ton of information about the Spark up to this point. But what I want to talk about specifically is what it's like to travel with the Spark, because I think traveling and sort of family get-togethers or going on a trip with your friends are kind of the main selling points of the Spark. The Mavic is already a pretty small drone and it's easily portable, but the Spark takes things to a whole nother level. So obviously, if you guys have not already seen the DJI Spark, this is what it looks like. It's much smaller in person than most people realize from seeing it from pictures. And the amount of technology that they were able to pack into such a small package is really unprecedented. There's really never been another drone of this size that wasn't just kind of a cheap toy. The Spark has obviously 3D sensing cameras and infrared cameras, a lot of that obstacle avoidance technology that DJI has been building on for years, as well as a 2-axis gimbal for really smooth and clear video. Now, one of the knocks against the Spark was that it was only a 1080p camera. And I mean, obviously being a Mavic owner and someone who has been using the Mavic Pro for several months, I'm obviously very partial to nice, clean looking 4K video, but the video that comes out of the Spark is very good 1080p video. The quality of the sensor combined with the gimbal to keep things nice and smooth really allows you to get some pretty interesting and pretty cool looking shots. Obviously you're going to lose a little bit of that detail, but for posting to social media and even for a lot of YouTubers out there who still post in 1080p, you're still going to get really good content that's usable. The other thing with the Spark is how quick it is to actually take out and launch. So one of the things that I've still struggled with, even with the Mavic, is figuring out exactly when, where, and how I'm going to fly the drone, especially if I'm on a trip or I'm doing something where I don't have a ton of time to just play with the drone for several hours and I just want to get a quick shot. The amount of time that it takes to take the Mavic out of its bag, open up all the arms, connect the controller to your smartphone, and then actually go through the process of setting up the drone, getting ready for launch, including removing the lens cover as well as the gimbal stabilizer clip that's on there. There's kind of a lot to getting the Mavic up in the air and getting ready to shoot some video or some photos. And so, if you need to just really quickly get a quick shot of you and a friend on a bridge or a cliff where you're at an interesting place where you want to kind of show the world what you guys are doing instead of just a up-close and personal selfie, doing that with the Mavic doesn't really make a lot of sense. Not to mention the fact that as small and quiet as the Mavic is, it is definitely a lot louder and noisier than something like the Spark. The Spark is so small and quiet and easy to launch that I found myself even reaching for the Spark over the Mavic in a lot of situations. So in terms of travel, I went on a trip to Northern California this past week, and I was in a lot of situations where I only had a few minutes to get a quick drone shot. I didn't really have time to sit and mess around with settings and make sure everything was just perfect. I really just wanted to, pop a drone up in the air, get a cool shot that kind of showed some of the surrounding area where we were, or maybe possibly get some cool panning or rising footage of the scenery that we were at. And the Spark was really perfect for that. Combine that with the fact that the Spark has 3 different ways that you can actually fly it or use it, makes for a lot of different scenarios that make it easier to use than you would say a Mavic or a Phantom. Obviously everybody's been talking about the Spark's gesture mode, so you can basically pull the Spark out, have it take off from the palm of your hand, and then use gestures to kind of get it to take a photo. That can all be done without connecting any type of controller or even your smartphone as a controller. So it's completely just the drone by itself, and you can get some really cool sort of the ultimate selfie kind of shots with that particular control mode. Now, you can also use your iPhone or Android device as the physical controller through a Wi-Fi system that the Spark has built into it. So you can basically connect your phone to the Spark's Wi-Fi network, and now you're controlling the Spark just like you would with a controller, albeit without physical controls. It's still a lot quicker than pulling out your controller and pairing that to your smartphone and then connecting that whole setup to your drone. The other thing is that because the Spark has the built-in quick shot modes, which allow you to do several different pre-programmed flight paths that record 30-second video clips during the flight, all that can be done by just taking out your phone, pressing a few taps on the screen, and off it goes and it does its thing. Now, not only are these modes really fun and cool that they even exist, but it's really, really interesting in the fact that it will go a long way towards DJI's ultimate goal, which is to make the Spark accessible to sort of the average consumer. So people who might normally be a little bit intimidated by a drone, or who maybe have been thinking about buying a drone but just are worried about the cost or the complexities of what it's like to try and fly a drone and use it to actually capture photos or video, this is definitely going to make that barrier of entry a little bit lower and a little bit easier for those folks. So I think the Spark does a lot of things right, but I do think at the end of the day, we're not quite to the point where the Spark is going to do for drones what, say, the iPhone did for smartphones. I don't think we're going to see your average mom or dad at his kid's soccer game or baseball game whipping out a drone and flying around the field. I think we're a little bit of a ways off from that. Another thing worth mentioning before we move on is that the Spark does have a micro USB charging port, which allows the Spark to be charged either via, like, say, a cell phone car charger, or you can also charge it using a portable battery charger, and that allows you to be able to charge the Spark while it's in your backpack or your bag. Definitely a lot of flexibility in what you can do with a drone that's that easy to charge and that easy to get up in the air. So yeah, I mean, overall my experiences with the Spark were pretty positive. So before we move on from the drone topic of conversation, I did want to touch on another story that I saw yesterday that foxnews.com posted that I thought was pretty interesting, especially if you're a current drone pilot or drone owner or someone who's looking to buy a drone in the near future. And that is the new law that's being proposed. This new law proposes that consumer drones constantly broadcast out their ID or registration number that FAA regulators or law enforcement agencies would be able to then access in a database to find out who the owner of that drone actually is and who it belongs to. A lot of people have issues with this. A lot of people are afraid of the rights of these drone owners or drone pilots and don't like the idea of the government having access to, like, who you are and for you to have to divulge all this information just to fly, just to basically participate in what most people consider a hobby. Now, my personal thoughts on this are, I think it would be a good thing. Right now, the government's trying to play catch up with this technology, and their current and easiest way to react is to just have a knee-jerk reaction and put a blanket ban on all these locations. Now, I can tell you that when I was in Northern California, the San Francisco Bay Area, it was almost impossible to find a place that was legal to fly a drone. Almost everywhere you went, you were risking breaking the law if you flew a drone. You were either in a 100% no-fly zone or you were in a heavily restricted area. So I personally think that if there was more regulation, or if there was more accountability for drone pilots to not break the law, to not fly drones in the middle of a city, to not fly drones near airports, and to not fly drones in naturally protected areas or national parks or wherever might harm wildlife or visitors to the park, I think that those things would be helpful, because right now there's bans or places where you can't fly a drone that make no sense. But again, they just decided to do this blanket knee-jerk reaction, which is to just basically say, no, you can't fly a drone here or anywhere, because it just makes it easier for them to control it while they try to figure out these laws. I actually want to see a licensing program. I think if drone operators had the opportunity or were required to get a license, just like you do with a motor vehicle, I think this would actually give people more options for where they could fly their drone, because at least regulators would then say, well, if this person flies a drone in this area and they damage someone's property, or they fly a drone and it hurts someone, or they violate FAA airspace, at least we can find them or track them down and hold them accountable. The same way they do with cars, right? So I think that this would be a good thing for the drone industry and for drone pilots, and really open things up for us. So let me know in the comment section below what you guys think, if you're okay with this type of regulation, or if this is something you would be completely against. I'd love to know your thoughts. Now, moving on to another subject that has been in the tech headlines quite a bit, and that is the SNES Classic Edition that was announced just a couple of weeks ago. Now, the SNES Classic is obviously the follow-up to the NES Classic Edition that was incredibly popular last holiday season, and my question is, do you guys think that the SNES Classic is going to be available, or do you think it's going to be just as hard to get your hands on as the NES Classic was before it? I personally think that Nintendo has learned their lesson, at least somewhat, because they did take a pretty significant PR beating, not only for how unavailable the NES was, but also with how quickly and sort of unceremoniously they just announced that it was not going to be getting reproduced any further. That was kind of something that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, who were hoping to buy one of these at some point when the initial hype had died down. So I think that Nintendo is going to have a lot more SNES Classics available initially, and I think that what's going to happen is that scalpers and all these people that are looking to gouge the prices by putting them on eBay for $500 are going to gobble them up initially, but I think when Nintendo shows that they can continuously refill or resupply the inventory, I think that those scalped prices are going to come down and people are going to stop trying to buy them up in mass quantities. So that's what I think is going to happen, but I'd love to know what you guys think, so be sure to leave some comments about that as well. Do you think that you will be buying the SNES Classic, and do you think it's going to be readily available? I'd love to know what you guys think. Also, one other thing about the SNES Classic that has been discussed a lot is the value proposition. So it does come with less games than the NES before it, and so a lot of people were kind of disappointed by this. Now, I actually think that because the games for the SNES were so much more evolved. They were much more complex. They had a lot more gameplay depth. They were, better stories. I think that you have a lot more replay value from the SNES classic games than you do for the NES. So I think even though there's fewer games, I think you're going to spend a lot more time per game than you did on the NES. And I think that's going to add a lot of the value proposition back into that. Another Nintendo item that has been obviously talked about quite a bit the past few months is, of course, the Nintendo Switch. Now, I was lucky enough to get my Nintendo Switch on launch day, on the day that it came out. I didn't have to wait, so I've had mine for a long time now, and I've had a chance to use it and play with it in a lot of different scenarios. But the one thing I hadn't really tested out yet was taking it on like a plane ride or a trip. And on this trip to Northern California that I went on last week, I was able to really spend some time on the plane, and I really got a good feel for how incredible it really is that you're sitting on a plane playing a game that you were a couple of days ago playing on your couch in your living room, and it's the exact same experience. And this is something that really just is not comparable to any other game console that's ever been out before. Now, my question is, and one of the stories that I keep seeing over and over, is a lot of people are kind of under the impression that the Nintendo Switch is in some kind of bubble, and it's going to burst anytime now, and all of this hype and excitement around the Switch is going to kind of just fall off. So I started to think a lot about that, and whether or not that's something that I could see happening. Now, I definitely think that we're still in that time frame where that could actually be a possibility, but I think as we continue to see the months roll on and the Nintendo Switch is still selling out, it's still incredibly popular, it's still in all the headlines, people are still talking about it, it's very relevant, and more third-party developers start to get to where it's harder to ignore bringing their titles to the Switch. I think that we're going to get to a point where it's harder to say that this is a bubble, and that you're going to have to just kind of accept that the Switch is actually truly a successful product, and it's going to continue to be successful probably until the Switch 2 comes out in a few years. I think that we might even see a shift in the industry where possibly Sony or even Microsoft, who's never actually released a portable version of any of the Xbox branded devices, could really possibly start to think that maybe their next consoles also need to be something that might be in that same realm of possibility, a portable and home machine hybrid. At the very least, I think that Nintendo has proven that this is something that gamers want. And I think that that's something that was definitely underestimated, how much people would really appreciate that type of experience. So I personally don't think that the Switch is in a bubble. I think that we are going to see it sort of make it through the other side and get over the hump to where people have to legitimately respect that it is a successful launch, and that game developers are going to continue to flock to the Switch when they see that this is something that gamers are interested in. So yeah, leave me some comments in the comment section below. Let me know, do you own a Switch? Do you plan on buying one? And do you think that the Switch is in a bubble, or you think it's kind of something that's going to be here for the long haul? So another story that keeps popping up in tech headlines is, of course, the OnePlus 5, which launched recently, and it's been getting a lot of both bad and good press, I guess you could say. There's definitely some issues with the OnePlus 5, and the higher price increase combined with some of those issues and some of its shortcomings has started to put people in a position to really ask, is the OnePlus brand still relevant, and is it still worth buying? Is it really, still that flagship killer that you would put into the same category as a Galaxy S8 or the iPhone 7? And I think that the reality is that OnePlus is really coming back down to earth a little bit. The first few OnePlus devices were launched with such hype and this sort of fever intensity where people were, had to be on these lists, and you had to get one through like basically a lottery system for all intents and purposes. It was really difficult to get your hands on a OnePlus when they first launched. But I think that OnePlus, their continued desire to build these phones that are truly on the same level as a Galaxy S8 or the iPhone 7 or any of the other flagship devices is continuing to raise their costs, and in turn means that they have to raise the cost that they sell it for. And you're kind of getting into this vicious cycle where again, the price versus value proposition is starting to shift just a little bit, and I think less and less people are going to be as quick to jump on a phone like the OnePlus 5 in the future. If I was going to buy a Android phone right now or this year or in the next few months, I probably would be waiting to see what Google does with the next Pixel phones before I make that decision to buy a OnePlus 5. I was always a huge Nexus fan, so I think that the Pixel phones are still kind of more in my wheelhouse, but the OnePlus 5 would still be on my radar. I just don't know that I'd be ready to pull the trigger as quickly as I would have the first few OnePlus devices. So if you happen to be someone who sees this video and you did buy a OnePlus 5, leave some comments below letting me know what your experience has been like, and if you actually are happy with your purchase or it kind of left you feeling like you wished you had bought something else. That does it for the main topics that I wanted to talk about in this episode. I did want to run through a couple of quick rumors and a couple of other news stories that kind of just popped up in the past few hours. Apparently, the iPhone 8 is still having some fingerprint sensor issues. Now, if you guys have been following this story, Apple has apparently, ever since they've been in development with the iPhone 8, trying to get the fingerprint sensor to be underneath the glass so that they no longer had to have an actual home button. And they've been trying desperately to do that so they don't have to put the fingerprint sensor on the back of the phone like a lot of other manufacturers are doing now. So yesterday, another new rumor came up that said that Apple was struggling to get the new fingerprint sensor to work underneath the glass of an OLED display, and that they may now, to avoid having to go to that back fingerprint scanning fingerprint sensor, might go to a 3D face scanning exclusively for the only way to unlock the iPhone 8. Now, I'm not buying that at all, because I just cannot see Apple abandoning something that has become so secondhand to most people. And the speed with which you can unlock your phone with your fingerprint sensors now is so much faster and so much more reliable than the 3D face scanning that I've tested out. So I couldn't see having that be the only way to get into my phone. I think that would be really annoying, and I just don't see Apple doing that. However, it would be a huge, huge loss for Apple if they did have to move that fingerprint sensor to the back of the phone. Right now, Apple has been taking a lot of heat for sort of falling off when it comes to innovation and new ideas. And for them to be the first ones to figure out how to get the fingerprint sensor to be hidden underneath the glass of the display would be a huge win for Apple, and it would go a long way to restoring people's sort of faith or enthusiasm in Apple's ability to innovate. So if they don't get that accomplished, I think that's going to be a huge blow for the iPhone 8, and I think it's going to hurt Apple's sales and as well as their reputation. I just think that would be a huge loss for them. The new Google Pixel phones also had some new rumors come out. There was a rumor that for a little while that they were going to put out 3 Pixel models this year as opposed to the 2 from last year. It looks like they're going back to, or the rumors are starting to shift back to, that they will only release 2 models of the new Pixel phones. There is a rumor, though, that in order to get dual front-facing speakers on the new Pixel phones, that they might have to be eliminating the headphone jack, similar to what Apple did with the new iPhone. So that might be kind of interesting to see too, because right now Apple is still really the only major phone manufacturer that has truly embraced eliminating the headphone jack, even despite the sort of, I guess, backlash that they got from a lot of people. So that's going to be interesting to kind of keep our eyes on what happens with the Google Pixel phones as well. Another interesting news story that just popped up today, this is like hot off the presses, it's just now starting to pop up in news feeds everywhere, is that the camera manufacturer Red, who makes some of the most high-end Hollywood production video cameras that you can buy, just announced they're going to release a smartphone. Now, this smartphone, as you can see here, is absolutely ridiculous in every way, just like every other product from Red. And it looks like this phone is going to cost upwards of $1,500, probably closer to $5,000 when you buy all of the different pieces to it, because this is a modular phone, just like their cameras. Now, Red's big hype around this phone is that they're calling it the Hydrogen 1. It's a standalone, full-featured, unlocked, multi-band smartphone operating on Android OS that just happens to add an additional feature that may shatter the mold of conventional thinking. And that is that it's going to have a 5.7-inch professional hydrogen holographic display. Now, I don't know what the hell that means. If anybody out there sees this video and can explain, even in the most limited amount of detail, what the hell a hydrogen holographic display is, I would love to hear it, and I would love to know how and why I should care about having that phone at that price. So, being a tech geek, I have to say that I'm fascinated by the idea of a company like Red putting out a smartphone. I'm sure it's going to be gorgeous to look at. I'm just having a hard time reconciling the reasons why I would want to spend $1,100 or $1,500 on a smartphone that has a holographic display. I can already see the huge list of caveats to how you would get a holographic image on a phone, period. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it's tied to some type of proprietary technology from Red themselves, and you're probably going to have to only view those holographic videos or that content through some proprietary hosting that they're going to provide, or some kind of proprietary format. I can only imagine the amount of complexities and little caveats that are going to be involved with getting an actual phone to produce a holographic image. So I'm really interested to hear more about it. The press release doesn't have a whole lot of information, so we're going to have to kind of keep our eyes on that over the next couple of weeks or months to hear more from Red about this crazy new phone that they're releasing. But if they can make it work, more power to them. So this cup of coffee is shot, and that means that it's time to wrap up this episode of Tech and Coffee. I hope you guys get something out of these videos. I hope you enjoy the content. I'll try to continue to make it as entertaining as possible and find the most interesting stories to share with you guys, as well as any crazy experiences that I've had with any of my own technology in the past couple of days or weeks. So keep in mind, these videos will be getting uploaded every Tuesday and Thursday for the foreseeable future. So make sure that if you liked this video, give me a thumbs up. If you loved it, subscribe so you get notified when each new episode launches, as well as all the other videos that I post to Gadget Reason. As always, I'd love it if you followed me on Instagram and Twitter at Gadget Reason, and be sure to stay tuned to this channel for any more videos that help you figure out the best reasons to spend your hard-earned money on the tech you love. So I'll catch you guys on the next one. Have a great day.